I'm Sunny Singh, and I have multiple hats, but today I'm speaking as an author as well as the founder of the Jhalak Prize, which was instituted last year, and it had its first round or first year, and it was awarded for the very first time on the 17th of March 2017. Another writer, Prajwal, who's going to be talking from a slightly different perspective, perhaps. Or maybe we're all going to be on the same page. Ming is a publisher, writer, also the co-founder of BME in Publishing Network, which started out last year. And that's Laura Susijn. She will be hopefully talking about experiences of trying to place writers who don't quite fit the bill. Laura has a very, very full stable of writers, and from very, very different parts of the country as well as the world. In addition to me, she also represents Alex Wheatle, Wong Sok Young, and many others. So I'll start off by simply asking everyone to give us a sense of how they feel about the issue, what they feel are their experiences. You'll be hearing it from multiple angles, and then we will move on to some of the things we're doing. It will be a conversation, and then hopefully we'll open it up for you to ask questions as well.
Lovely. Thank you, Sunny. Can you hear me?
Not really.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everybody. I am the son of a Nepalese mother and an Indian father. My first book was a collection of short stories called The Gurkha's Daughter. It was first published in the UK and then subsequently published elsewhere in the world. I really wanted to be a part of this panel simply because I wanted to share with you some of my experiences and how I went about getting published. I had quite an easy path to publishing, which I realize is not the norm. I was a bit of an anomaly, but I also have seen a lot of minority writers. I got my master's in creative writing from Oxford, which had some phenomenal writers who are not yet published simply because I think there isn't the market, simply because publishers aren't willing to take the kind of risks that they should. Have I been lucky? Yes, I have. Do I think I'll continue being lucky? Thankfully, I sell in a few places. It helps that, I have two countries clamoring for a piece of me. So, yeah, so that helps a little bit. But, I think that with a lot of Indian writers, with a lot of South Asian writers, there is this expectation that we write a certain kind of book. I was just talking to my co-panelists earlier today about how I have not come across a single female Indian writer who writes scientific fiction and has been published internationally. I'm hoping we can address those issues. I'm hoping, you'll prove me wrong by telling me that there is someone out there who is about to be published or something. But yeah, I think we're expected to write a certain kind of book. I think we're expected to write literary fiction more than any other kind of fiction. And the fact that some of us try not to stray from what we have been doing because that's what works, maybe doing a disservice to all the writers out there. I just parted ways from my agent because I was sick and tired of writing about the Nepali-speaking world. And my agent thinks, or used to think, that it's a very good idea for me to stick to this tried and tested, Prajwal Parajuly writes about the Himalayas, kind of a thing. But I don't want to do that anymore. And I wanted to write a children's book. My agent wasn't too keen on that. And I'm hoping it gets picked up. I'm hoping it gets published. But, we'll see how it goes. So that's my 2 cents.
Fair enough. interestingly, because we do have two people who are in the industry, or in different parts of the industry, so I'm actually going to ask Lara, who's an agent, and fortunately in the nearly 18 years that she's represented me, she's never asked me to write any kind of book. And she's quite happy to take books or another fiction that I write and keep working on placing it. But perhaps she has some ideas on what goes on when she takes on an author and tries to take them to the publishers.
Yeah, well, I think there is a different way of going about it. Some agents work based on what's saleable. So I just work on what I like, and that is not always terribly easy to sell. But the reactions I get are quite telling. So I'm representing people writing definitely literary fiction, definitely contemporary, and not sort of nostalgia for the Raj or us and them novels, or, and there are also people smashing every preconception. So I've got an Indian writer writing a novel set in Afghanistan. I've got another Indian author writing a book in the voice of a Japanese woman, and this is all should be perfectly allowed, of course. And they are genuinely brilliant novels. What I'm getting when I'm submitting those novels, particularly here, a lot easier in Europe, is we don't know how to sell this. Right? So the problem is not that they can't recognize that these books are great. They can. The problem is that they think they can't sell enough copies. Now, I do always place the books, but they are with small independents who have less overheads, don't need to sell as many to make the equation work financially as the big houses do. Now, so the question is why? Why do these books not sell enough copies? Of course, if you're with a small independent publisher who do great work and do massive passion and total dedication, but they don't have the resources to get the books out there in a major way. Bookshops require you to pay for certain promotions, and Amazon does, etc. So it's a financial issue. But that should not stop a book from selling in large quantities if there are enough people out there supporting it. So whether that be bloggers or whether that be, just people getting. But the problem is if people don't know the book is out there, how they're going to buy it, right? I mean, it's cheap to reprint these days, so an independent can print as many as they want, but it's supply demand. So, why are they not reaching the market that is clearly out there, right? And of course, if that market is being reached, then the bigger houses would go for it too. It's purely a sales issue, right? It's not true that they don't want to publish these books. It's not true that they can't recognize a good book from a bad book. They can do all that. It's always the same issue, fundamentally, sales figures. And then, of course, you get those other reactions, which is, where are the jihadis and where are the veiled women waiting to be liberated by the West? The us and them novels, right, which is deep-rooted in this country, but it's changing, right? I mean, because of good work being done and everybody wanting and realizing it needs to change, there are different genres where the problem is much less severe. So YA and children's is much more open. I think maybe they're just closer to their market, right? So they're not dependent so much on review coverage and bookshops getting on board, and you've got your libraries, you've got your schools, you're getting straight to those little people. But it's still a bit of a mystery because the market is definitely out there. It's huge, right? If you tap the British Asian markets, those people want to read. So why are they not being reached? Can you help with that?
Well, at the moment I work for a small theatre performing arts publisher, but I have a lot of friends who work for major publishers. I've done internships in major publishers, and I talk quite a lot with people from major publishers and so on. And I kind of feel like it's, as you said, it's about sales figures. I think it's about the fact that they don't know how to tap into that market.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a friend called Chris McCrodden who has time and time again used data. I don't know if you've seen those threads. He's used data to show that there are people who are open, a huge market, as he said, to reading about those types of books and want something different, want something new. But I do feel like it's the publishers going, yeah, the market is out there, we just don't know how to get to them. And then after that, it's about we don't know how to get to them, and we're not willing to spend the money on figuring out how to get to them or hiring people who would have more insight into that. And therefore they stick to books that will, that they know how to sell already.
Yeah. So
and
do you know how to reach it?
I mean, not me personally, not, on this one person.
Help.
I think, but, the solution is, there are many solutions, I feel, but one would be, it would be nice to, not just hire more people who are not middle class, Oxbridge University white backgrounds, but also to change the culture in publishing as well, because there are a lot of friends that I talk to daily who they've been hired into a big publishing company, and some of them are supported very well, they've moved on up the career ladder, they do fantastic work, and quite a lot of others feel like they have daily sort of encounters or microaggressions, or they talk to people about decisions that they want to make about certain books, whether it's in marketing or sales, and they feel like they're not being listened to. So I think it's as much about the culture within publishing to be open to new ideas, to open to listening to people who they've hired recently or who they should have hired in to bring in a new perspective, to actually listening to those people and then to basically give them confidence and the financial backing as well.
You've still got to work within the beast, though. What you were saying there, the one place, if you get reviewed, that actually translates into lots of sales, the Daily Mail.
Yes, I know. Isn't that horrific? I mean, it is something that baffles me to this day.
What are you going to do? So the changes that need to be made are like so major in the whole country. Oh.
No, it can feel a bit unsurmountable, but I think I want to pick up something that you said earlier. Fortunately, I don't have two countries clamoring for a piece of me. I have no country clamoring for a piece of me, which is quite freeing, in fact. But one of the things I do notice, because I work in multiple places, we're talking today, and we're talking about British publishing. But when we look at English language publishing in India, the very same dynamics are at play. So we still have most of the industry in India, which is from particular backgrounds, from the same schools, the same universities, the same costs, and then the kinds of decisions that are being made are very similar. And I think it's necessary for us to also recognize that those overlaps that we talk about, and we should be talking about over there as well, will probably have some of the same solutions. So it's about including more people who are not from St. Stephen's or Xavier's in the publishing industry. It's about including people who are not Brahmin and Carolite to make the decisions. And those exact decisions and the same dynamics work here as well. So Ming said about, not Oxbridge, not white, middle class, etc.
Not from the south of England or London.
Not from south of England or London. And I think those need to be challenged. I think both countries, for me, I think Brexit and the series of events in India, ongoing events in India, show the danger of not telling stories from a wider range of people. And so as a writer, for me, the issue is not about are we being published, are we being included, am I getting sales up? But for me as a writer, it's about recognizing that stories are about life and death. If we tell the stories, we humanize people. When we don't tell their stories, we dehumanize them, we erase them from the narratives and our imagination. But that also means we open the way for erasing them physically. And that's, for me, been the biggest issue around the Jhalak Prize. So we started the Jhalak Prize as a way to incorporate these stories. I would love somebody in India to put together a similar process. and do a prize like the Jhalak Prize, which is for Indian minorities and cuts across all the region, caste, creed, all the different elements that we have to focus on.
Minorities in what way?
Well, minorities and the people whose works are not being talked about.
Okay.
The people whose stories are not being included. How many times? Can you name, for example? Let's be a little bit controversial. Can you think of an Indian Muslim writer who is also not posh? It's as simple as that, isn't it? Can you think of a writer who writes in English and gets that kind of support? And if you can only think of one, my question will be, why just the one? What are we doing wrong? Yeah. No, I think they are right. There's lots of writers and there's much more work coming through, but I think the dynamics, because whether we like it or not, sadly, it is the English writing that's being picked up overseas. In many ways, the writers that are traveling from India are the writers who have the ability to are writing in English. And then the publishing industry there is incorporating very similar dynamics. And I think we really need to think about that one, that we shouldn't just sort of posit it as a British problem. It's a global problem. But I wanted to actually get Ming to talk a little bit more about something that that she and Sarah Shafi at the bookseller started, which was a support network, which is, I think, another initiative, kind of like Jhalak, that could be replicated and taken to India in different ways. Do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, so me and Sarah Shafi from the bookseller set up BME in Publishing, which is a network for people of colour who work in publishing in the UK. It is London-based because that is, unfortunately, the centre of like where publishing happens. And we try to basically have a space where people feel safe to talk about anything they want to. They can use it to network, they can use it to make contacts, to say that they want to find a job or a mentor, but they can also just, make friends, do whatever they want to. And we try and meet up at least once a month. We have at this point about 250 people on the mailing list. We've got different mailing lists for people who work in the industry, for writers, for people who want to get into the industry. And generally we get about 40 to 50 people a month coming to each meetup, although the first birthday one that we had on Friday had about 80 to 90 people, so that was quite good. I think it's been a real success, and I've sort of seen that in that a lot of people have said that they, have made friends with someone who's sitting like 2 rows away in Penguin Random House, for example, and they didn't know that, they existed, or they just had never had the courage to say, oh, hi. And I think they've found that it's been a really good source of solidarity and comfort, and perhaps a way to make friends with people who would have some great ideas that they could connect with and work with, which has been really good. I feel like that's a space that's been really badly needed, because I think, wasn't there there was a survey done about the number of people of colour in publishing 10 years ago and also released last year, and it found that the number of people of colour in Britain who work in publishing has actually gone down by sort of 1 to 2%, was it? Yep. Which is shocking. And you kind of wonder how that reversal has come about. So I think like a space where you find that kind of solidarity, where you find that someone is working somewhere close to you, is really important. Especially in an industry where I still don't feel like people of colour who work in an industry that purports to be of social good, as well as strictly a capitalist industry, it doesn't give them the support they need, especially not throughout people who want to progress in the career. So that's been really great. I hope that in the sort of year or so to come we can do other things.
I think there is a fundamental problem, right? I mean, in publishing there is a fundamental problem that you've got to be prepared to work incredibly hard and earn really badly.
That's also an issue, yeah.
And you're never going to earn well, right? Now, who out there is going to go for that. There, in certain cultures, there is that equation. It's like that's too embarrassing to be working that hard and earning that badly. So, which is why publishing is populated by the people it is populated by. You know, they have mummy daddy money. They have, I don't know, somebody bought them a house. I mean, it's, you know, and actually it almost has to be that way. Otherwise, how do you do it? How do you survive? It's a problem.
No, I agree, and I think what it also then does is
How do you
it creates the circular scenario, the sort of a vicious circle of everyone going round. But having said that, we do know that the big publishing houses do pay very well at certain levels.
Yeah.
So
Only after you
when
get
it
to
gets to the
Right.
really
Yeah.
high rarefied areas, they paid extremely well. Now, how about rethinking some of those elements?
Have tried.
Because it's going to be required. Now, we've had these conversations. Well, the Jhalak Prize had an interesting episode. Some of you might know about it. We were reported earlier in the year by an MP to the Equalities Commission for being a racist prize. So we took it on board. We said, okay, well, we'll give you the results and we'll show you. So at the end of it, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission backed us. They said that the prize was necessary, and it was precisely the kind of initiative that they supported and, in fact, recommended. So what we've now done is we've asked them for a meeting, because if the Equalities Commission is now ready to recognize and has recognized that there's a problem, well, as per the Equalities Act 2010, that they're supposed to enforce, they should be taking steps. So we want to now, with the Jhalak Prize, has now asked them what they will do towards the industry. So will that require a report? Will that require an Equalities Commission recommendation or a series of recommendations? And so we're going to start pushing for that. And I think for me, the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's about finding ways to disrupt. That's a great financial and tech term, but I think it's a useful one. We have to find disruptive processes, and we have to find points of disruption that we can in order to break this vicious circle that kind of goes around and the blame gets passed over and over again. Prajwal, do you want?
I've been very curious about how the prize has been received, what kind of challenges you face besides an MP threatening to drag you to court. And you already have a first winner, don't you? If the prize has had a significant impact on his book sales, and I'd love to know more.
Well, it's been really interesting because I think it picks up on some of the points made earlier by Ming and by Lara about, you know, how do people buy books when they don't know they exist? And the first winner was Jacob Ross. He's done this brilliant book called The Bone Readers, and it's the first of 4 novels in that same series. And it's been interesting to see, just online, the ways in which people are reacting to his books. So when the news of, when we could go public last month with this whole palaver with the Equalities Commission, one of the things I thought was really sweet where people just said, well, I've just popped in and I've bought his book. And I've ordered his book. And in a sense, it became this process of reaffirming the prize. So in that sense, we were very well received. What's also been interesting is just notice, because it's quite strange, readers who are starving for these books get very excited. So what's been really interesting is just since the prize was awarded, so since the 17th of March, going online and seeing readers post photographs from Waterstones. Different Waterstones shops across the country saying, "Oh, look, it's here." Yeah. So it's a little bit of what Jhalak Prize has done. It's just gotten the books in hands of people, and it's brought the recognition that this book exists. What's also, of course, been very interesting is we had a stellar shortlist. It was just impossible trying to pick up a winner in any case. But what's been brilliant is, of course, everyone pretty much on that shortlist has now been nominated for other prizes, which also makes me wonder, or has been longlisted or shortlisted, which also makes me wonder if the fact that we announced our long list in January, that we announced our shortlist early on, how much did we contribute to raising profiles of those writers, a lot of whom were from small indie presses, for other people to pick up? And we all know that once a writer is given that accolade, the career just shoots up by a notch. So I think that's been for us a very interesting process. What we've also done is we've been very, very clear, we will make our data public. So we will talk about what is sent in to us. We will talk about the genres that are sent in to us, the independent versus the big boys. I mean, we will make this data public. It's a little bit of looking at it as a jigsaw. So we have bits and pieces of information. The Jhalak Prize submissions data will create a similar sort of data set over the next few years to see what's not being published. Now, you'd be really amazed. This year, there were 2 books that can be qualified as romances that were sent in. 2. Given the fact that the romance market is huge, why are there not more books that are not about women in unhappy marriages because they're Asian, or in abusive family because they have Caribbean origins? Why is it that people of color just can't have love stories? Right? So to me, it feels like the publishers are missing a big trick.
Are they being written but not being published,
Yeah.
or they're not being written?
Yeah. No, we got self-published, but published traditionally. We got 2.
And were they good?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
That's an issue, yeah.
Yeah.
Got to be good.
No. They worked in the genre quite well.
Yeah.
But it was quite shocking because that was something I wasn't expecting.
Do you ever talk to people who publish that genre?
Not often, no, actually, but that's part of like my own interests.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think there's more of a diverse sort of romance industry, I think, in the US, but obviously it's still not great. But yeah, otherwise no. But I mean, I think we all know that there are certain genres where the number of writers who are of colour is shockingly low. So like crime, for instance, where all of these crime novels seem to be written by like white men or women. So why is that? Why do we have a particular problem?
Well, I'm about to be able to give you some more data when I go out with my, not crime, but steampunk, written by a Pakistani author.
Oh, wow.
And a woman.
Let's see what
And a
happens,
woman.
eh? Yeah.
Wow.
A female one, yeah. Might never even sell it.
No. Well, yes. Will you be able to sell steampunk written by a Pakistani woman author? That's your experiment right there. But it is. I mean, I don't want to sound like it's all doom and gloom. I think what the last year has shown is that initiatives work, disruptions work, and I think Ming's somebody who's and the BME and Publishing Network has created the impetus, the momentum, if you want to call it that way. The fact that in some ways, yes, the Jhalak Prize has been naming and shaming publishers, and if that means that we're going to embarrass people into publishing things, that's fine.
Yeah,
Can you tell us about some publishers you've named and shamed and what they did?
Oh, yeah, I think there was at one point about 6 months ago when I said, really, we're a tiny prize. We haven't even we haven't even had a first year, and all you can send me is Zadie Smith, because that's who you publish, and you have no one else you can send in. And it was quite telling. And then, of course, the publishers the big boys especially, started to send in work because they did feel that they had been sort of embarrassed, except they sent us cookery books. Because they hadn't sent any, they hadn't published anyone. They got to the stage once they were shamed by saying, look, can you send me something other than Zadie Smith? They sent us, Jhalak Prize got about 20 cookery books, very beautiful ones. If somebody's into cooking, I'm sure they'd look good. But it was very bizarre.
So then we need to get the Daily Mail.
Yeah, we
do
need
like a massive load of coverage for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is quite a strange process there.
Sunny, I'm sorry I'm making this about the prize, but it is about the prize, so bear with it, people. Would you consider taking the prize to India?
Look, I would love to take the prize to India, but I think, as I said, I think that I'm very aware that in India I am an English-speaking, middle-class, upper-caste woman. I have certain privileges, and it isn't my space to be the disruptor. That has to come from someone who I can support, and I can share it and advice and do whatever else I can to help it along. But that is not my space. I think we, as human beings, all of us, we have privileges in certain areas and disadvantages in another. My position in India is a very privileged one, and it would be inappropriate for me to then step over and take that on. There is something quite special for me about, of course, starting the Jhalak Prize and talking about it here today in British Library. The largest repository of colonial documents and stolen documentation, perhaps, in the world. And it's particularly, I suppose, important because the Jhalak Prize was named after my grandmother. My grandmother never saw the inside of a school. She never was educated. She grew up in a very small village in Bihar, and then got involved with multiple reasons and multiple places with the nationalist movement in different ways. Our village itself was sacked and during 1857. So my grandmother had stories of older times. There was this still a mango orchard that was bricked up. It was walled off and nobody went into, and the trees just were let to die. And the reason nobody went in there was that's where the British hanged the young men and boys who they found in 1857, often off the backs of the elephants that they found also in the village, and the horses. So for me, the Jhalak Prize is a subversive, it's a revolutionary, it's a radical prize, and it's important that it happens here. It's for me, it's part of the decolonization process that has not ended. I would like someone else in India to pick up the baton over there and do the same. Because the decolonization process isn't just over here, it's got to happen over there too, at all the levels.
Yeah, and also, as your agent, given there's quite a lot of work, this Jhalak Prize, right? And there's a lot of work all around it, promoting it, making the issues known and talked about. I'd like you to have some time to write.
Yes, I would like to do that too. It's something that the Jhalak Prize has done over the last year. It's taken up an enormous amount of time.
Enormous amount of time, yeah. But it needed it, and it's working. So,
Yeah.
Who is funding the prize?
We have an anonymous benefactor, and
That's not you.
No. Look, I can barely pay my bills. I'm a writer and I work as an academic. I'm a junior academic to boot. Trust me, I do not have that kind of money. But I think what was really interesting, and I think it also opens up this question around individual responsibility and social responsibility. The benefactor is somebody who works in the city. And the press in this country loves to bash the city and how evil the financiers are and the banks are and so on. It's somebody who works in the city who put up the money with the caveat that we would run this prize for up to 5 years or however long it takes. But we are not a charity, so unfortunately there's no tax breaks involved. We just thought we got the money and we'll run with it. And the only reason was that they'd like more books that they want to read. And I think that's a good way to think about it. So if somebody else wants to set up a prize elsewhere, find a reader who's also possibly involved in some kind of social awareness levels or social awareness abilities, and they'll run with it.
Fantastic.
So, should we open up to questions? I think it would be interesting to have a longer discussion or a bigger discussion with people who are here. Is there a mic?
is there...
Back there.
I'm fascinated by the concept of language. We've been recently introduced to India over the last 3 or 4 years, and we've been told, I'm not sure if this is true, that there are 50 different languages and 500 different dialects. how would you overcome the concept of someone of ill education to come to a new prize, and how would they get that translated into something like English, be it's an international language, whereas Tamil, any one of the other languages, would really struggle to get an international coverage. And it'd just be interesting with your vast level of expertise to be able to think, well, okay, let's assume that we're going to have this prize. How are you going to do it?
Well, exactly. Look, I think Britain has a translation prize, right? We actually do have a prize that looks at specifically books that have been translated into English. And I think that's something that India does as well. There's multiple places of recognizing works in different languages, not just English, but also in translation. What we do have, however, is this sort of gap. And the gap is for historical reasons. English was prized. English has status in ways that other languages don't. That also means English writers travel abroad. We're seen as the acceptable kind because we speak in English and we can drink wine, so that makes us global. Whereas other writers don't. And I have to say, as somebody who reads in multiple Indian languages, I find more innovative work happening in languages other than English in India. And I would love more translations to be coming out and being pushed abroad, because there's so much. In some ways, Indian writing in English has a very similar problem as the publishing does, where it's primarily the people writing it are middle class, they're urban, their interests are particular, and let's be very honest, I think probably the most innovative, dangerous, radical writing comes from different spaces rather than middle class comfort. And unless we start bridging that gap, it's a shame that more people don't have access to that writing. I'm not sure if that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. It was interesting going into a couple of bookstores in minor towns where the majority of books were in English, and huge collections of Jane Eyre and Shakespeare. And you think, well, when you think of English society, and I know British society has a lot to blame, huge amount to blame, but the concept that is still being rammed down people's throats in another country. What's happened to India's history? Massive, far superior to that of Britain, that is just it's lost in the ether. And I just didn't, I looked around almost in despair. We're just thinking, well, where is it? Here I am, white middle-class male, looking for Indian culture and really struggle to find it.
Can I add something to what you were talking about? I think it's a very exciting time for the publishing industry in India right now. A lot of translations are being published. A few new publishing houses like Speaking Tiger Books have special departments that are dealing with translations. I mean, they're translating some very well-known Nepali writers into English, which is extremely exciting to me. It's terribly gratifying too. And one of the most popular books to have come out of India last year was something called Ghachar Gochar, which was originally written in Kannada. Kannada? Yeah. And it was one of those few books written in an Indian regional language that made its way to the US, to the UK, and everywhere, and was reviewed in all the major papers. So things are changing, and that makes me happy. So perhaps it would behoove you to maybe look at books being published in India that have not yet come abroad, or maybe make a trip to India and go to the bookstores there, and you will find more books there on Indian culture, on Indian history, on Indian languages than you would here. But yeah, it's a good time. There have been some very positive developments, and that make me happy.
Yeah, there's definitely stuff happening. I mean, it's not
And I mean, and let's not. I think probably last week's news here in Britain was really brilliant. Little Brown has now got a dedicated imprint called Dialogue Books, which will be for writers of colour, and they've actually got somebody who is absolutely and utterly brilliant and will be doing really exciting things. So I think there is a sense that the change must happen, but I think there's also a second side to it. The change must happen, but we must make the change. And I think that we must make the change is the bit that, if readers were picking up more things, more diverse books. I think it was 2014 when there was a whole group of writers, male writers across the US, and primarily they called it the Year of Reading Women. Because they looked at their own reading lists, and these were very, well-educated people who were writers themselves, and they looked at their reading list and realized they didn't read women. So it was just a simple thing of just noticing that, and there was one writer who said of course I read women, looked at last 50 books he'd read, 2 were by women authors. So it was just that understanding that things have to shift, and perhaps, if we didn't read Jonathan Franzen or Ian McEwan over and over and over again, it would possibly open the space for other people.
Anyone else?
Have we got a question? Was that a question? Oh.
That's it.
How long do you think you want to run the Jhalak Prize?
How long will we run the Jhalak Prize? Well, the prize was set up with one goal in mind, to shut it down. We want the prize to stop. We never want to ever hand out another Jhalak Prize again. That's the goal. Unfortunately, that goal will only be met when Jhalak Prize is not needed. That means that we will continue as long as we can, or until the change comes. In my mind, as my agent said, it'd be great if I could go off and write, rather than actually keep.
I think it's going to be needed for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're going to be needed for a bit. Hey, do you want to add to that?
I've got a question.
Yes.
So, are you talking to editors mostly? Because
What, in relation to the
is there
network?
anybody in marketing in big publishing houses that is, part of your network, or
Yeah, we've got.
is that interface that it's really quite necessary? See, I'm not worried about there being a lack of people of colour in the editorial department, because I know that these people are perfectly capable of recognising a great book written, whoever's written it. But their obstacles.
Marketing and sales.
Exactly. They sit there in the acquisitions meeting and they're all going, oh no, we'll only be able to sell 90 copies of that, or whatever it is. And if there's somebody in there who's actually going, excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, for people who belong to the network, who do work in industry, we've got quite a varied range. So there's quite a few people who are editors, who are marketers, who are sales as well. But I mean, I'm aware that the industry is really big, so actually in proportion to that, we still haven't got enough people who are decision makers, basically, in the rooms. And if they are in the rooms, then often they're like the only ones in the meetings, It's very hard to make your voice heard and listened to if you're the only person.
Yeah, and it's also probably telling them, explaining how to speak, the language that they need to.
Yeah.
Because if you've got 2 books here, absolute genius work by, Sunny Singh, another genius work by John Jones, right? And they feel a hell of a lot more comfortable with this one on how to sell it, how to get it reviewed, how to get it out there. So if we can give them the ways to speak about, you have to give them, this shouldn't be necessary. Yeah. It should just be, here's a great book.
Yeah, it's also about how they think you can market it. I mean, there's a friend of mine who works in sales who was in a meeting about covers. You have a long, like lots of meetings about covers, about how you were going to market it to people. Because obviously, the first thing that people see when they walk into a shop is the cover. And that says a lot about how the team behind it, sales and marketing, feel it should be sold to people.
Yeah.
And it was a non-fiction book about, I think, the history of Southeast Asia, I think maybe a couple of particular countries. And my friend is from an East Asian background, but she goes to those territories quite regularly, etc., etc. The cover was red, it used Chinese motifs, and my friend was really quite angry about this because obviously it's, Chinese motifs, not the same as Southeast Asia, very obviously. But the designer and the person who had perhaps given them the brief in sales or marketing had gone, perhaps we could use something from Asia, and they'd gone China, Asia. And my friend was the only person of colour in the room, and she had to speak up and say, my customers, she had to rephrase it in the whole sales way of, my customers in Southeast Asia that this book is basically about, they will not enjoy this and they won't be able to sell it. And you only need one voice, but also you also need to be able to speak up. But it is harder if you're just that one person in the room.
Yeah, I have to say that whole covers debate is an entire different world.
But you mean,
but I completely agree.
But it says a lot about how they thought that they could market and sell the book.
Yeah.
If you must know, every edition of my book that's been published outside of South Asia has a sari-clad woman on the cover.
Of course.
Sari-clad women, the Taj Mahal, hennaed hands.
Prayer flags for me,
Lotus.
prayer flags, and the mountains, because I'm from the Himalayas.
It's sort of, if you look at the books about Africa, in quotes, and Africa, of
So
course,
it's a
as we all
sunset.
know that it's a country, not a continent. So it'll be sunsets and acacia trees and an elephant, no matter where this thing is set. And those are the kinds of additional areas that we're battling, and that's why we need people in the design departments, in the production departments, but also marketing and sales. Interestingly enough, Lara and I had this conversation about my book, my last novel, where the conversation was around, I don't want the bloody Taj Mahal on my book. And Lara said, yes, I understand that, but you do know if we put the Taj Mahal on the book, it would sell more. And, as a writer, you do kind of go, where do I,
There was no
do I
Taj
sell?
Mahal on the book.
There was no Taj Mahal. It was never mentioned. But it was a choice I had to make. That should I stick with my principles or go with it?
Yeah, see, I gave in because I think publishers know what they're doing. I mean, these are, you'll find a Gurkha's Daughter and Land Where I Flee out there, and they sort of stand out. I mean, they're colorful, they're pretty, they're nice. I mean, they would totally look out of place in an Indian bookstore. My Indian cover for the Gurkha's Daughter is that of an innocent little girl, which looks, it's a beautiful cover. But somehow my publishers in the UK just didn't take to it. And maybe they know better.
I don't know about that one.
I mean, you have to take a stand at some point, and you can have an absolutely stunning cover that is not doing that. Right? I mean, I'm fighting this battle constantly, and even showing that when I win, book sells better. So that's not always the case. Not always the case.
I mean, that's why it's about changing the culture as much as it is about changing who makes the decisions.
But I did put my foot down with hennaed hands and mangoes. I wasn't going to have them.
Everyone's got their red line.
Sunny, one last question about the prize. So if there's someone deep-pocketed and generous enough in the audience who wants to be involved with the prize to make it bigger and better, perhaps have a higher cash amount attached to it than the book, would you like that? How would they go about it?
Do you know the funny thing is, I keep getting asked. I mean, can we support it? Can we get involved with the prize? And as I said, the prize was started to be stopped. You really want to support the prize.
But we
buy books,
know
buy
realistically
books by other people. Talk about books to other people. And I think. And find different points of disruption. I don't think I think my worry is that we will have started these things. So there will be BME in publishing.
Yeah.
There'll be the Jhalak Prize. There'll be dialogue books. And then that's where it will stop because we will have ticked the box and said, that's it. What we need is as many points of disruption, as many places he can go into. So I've got all sorts of, I keep trying to do all the different things and coming up with ideas. And there's loads to be done. So there's one project around getting, there's not enough designers and illustrators of color for children's books. And so that's another area to get involved with. You know, let's get a prize going for picture books that rewards and awards and recognizes young illustrators of color. Why should we kind of stick to one and say that covers us all?
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
What we want these things to do is to make people less complacent, not more complacent, basically. We can't let them go, the ethnic people have done the job for us on this side, so we're just going to let it go.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it. That's what you're getting. That's us off.
Okay. All right. If anybody's got any final questions, we'll be happy to answer them, or we can sort of round up, you know, finish off and come down and have a chat one-on-one. Happy to do that. Huh? Okay, great. Well, thank you for staying on, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, all four of you, for being on this panel.
Oh.
Do you mind? Sorry.
Take a pic. The Jhalak Prize.
Thank you, all of you. We'd like to announce the awardees for the most active tweeter. First prize goes to @LifeIsAFestival. The second one is Vikas Wadhwani, whose handle is @VicEcstatic. And the third prize goes to Naomi Canton. Thank you all very much.